Father, it's been a privilege to enjoy a meal together and to be here to learn more about how amazing a God you are. Bless us this afternoon. Bless me with wisdom as I'm answering questions and seeking to share the information you've given me. We love you in Jesus' name. Amen. So, dinosaurs. Let's see, you saw my lead picture. Isn't that a nice picture? Okay. Why dinosaurs? Why would anybody want to work on dinosaurs, and why us in particular, in meeting us as Christian believers in the Bible creation? This began in 1996. I told a little bit of how it got started in the children's story. It was not something I planned or even was interested in at the time. My field was paleontology and geology and stratigraphy, sedimentology. And I was working on whales down in Peru, as I mentioned, when this opportunity opened up. And for me, it was all about saving data. It was not about proving creation. It was not about even having anything to do with creation. As a scientist, seeing data that's irreplaceable being washed away every year was more than I can handle. And this rancher knew that. He was very sentient, an older guy, and he sensed that he could capture me to work on this if he could do it right. And so he took me up onto this ridge and said, open the door, and I looked out, and there were all these bones on the ground, and I just couldn't stand it. I said, I've got to at least come out here and save all these bones. And that was 25 years ago. That was 1996, yeah. And I'm still out there, and we just finished this last year, a $2 million headquarters building on the ranch, so that going into the future, long after I'm gone, until the Lord comes, we will have a facility there to continue to work this site. So we began then in 1996 with Earth History Research Center, which was an organization that a friend of mine and I had started, Southwestern Adventist University, where I was employed at the time, and Hansen Research Station, which was a group of individuals at the Hansen Ranch who were involved in this project. So we had a board and carried out research and controlled who had access to the site and all those kinds of things. So these three organizations together have carried this out for now 27 years, I don't know, so many years. We go out there every June, and we work on the site for a month. Now, people often ask, why are you only there for a month? Why don't you keep going and get it all done? Well, if you know Wyoming, June is the only month you want to be there. It's too cold in May and it's too hot in July, so number one. And number two, it's an active cattle ranch. And the rancher has to run cattle in there sometime during the summer, and so we can't be there when the cows are there. There are like 500 or 1,000 head of cattle in there, and it's chaos. So that's why we're there. And the third reason is we get enough bones out in 1 month to keep us more than busy for the rest of the year. Because you can't just throw them into a cupboard. The bones have to be prepped, they have to be curated, numbered, and chronicled, and all that information goes into the computer, and then as you'll see in a minute, there's other processing that goes on. Our objectives when I started were to save dinosaur bones, save data, and promote the science of paleontology. Secondary to that was the idea that when the former paleontologists who'd been at the ranch asked the ranch owner for permission to build a field station there, the ranch owner had seen him going into a local town and bringing kids out and using the rancher's bones to teach him about evolution. And the rancher was a creationist, so he didn't like that. So he told the guy, I'll give you permission to build your station if you will teach him about creation as well as evolution. And the paleontologist said, nope, I'm out of here. And as he left, he said over his shoulder, this is the last day science will be done on the Hanson Ranch. That was his epithet. And they even scrawled that on the shack they left out in the field on the walls, that science is not going to happen here anymore. There are a bunch of Yahoo creationists coming in, and they won't know what to do with science. So, number 2, to set a high standard for research so that other paleontologists could see that creationists, people that believe in the Bible account of origins, do good science. In other words, this was an opportunity for us to present to the scientific community a face of creation they didn't know, that we are real scientists. Third, come on, we're really anxious to learn more about dinosaurs. What did they do? How did they run? What kind of family structures did they have? Why did they all die, and why are they all here? So those are all interesting questions that we wanted to know the answers to. And of course, no teacher wants to know answers for himself. If you're not sharing the answers you're finding, then you're not doing your job. And so we wanted to share this information with as many people as we could. And fourthly, it was our aspiration to reach out to other scientists who are evolutionists and to share with them Jesus. Because if we're not doing that, we're not doing our job either. And so these were our 4 goals. They didn't all come at once. As I said, my first goal was save bones. Over the years, as the program developed, it was very clear God had something more in mind for us than just science as usual. This bone bed is the reason we got there, was this major bone bed. Since then, we've expanded out. We have, right now, I think 39 quarries, places where we excavate bones. And of course, we're not doing all 39 any time, but there are that many places that we go around and check once in a while and maybe excavate in. This bone bed is immense. It covers, at a minimum, half a square kilometer. It's not just a little bone bed. It's huge. Probably the largest that I know of in the world. So we're trying to fill up a gap in the understanding of the science of these dinosaurs in the Lance Formation in Wyoming. We have so far excavated about 40,000 bones. We have that many chronicled in our collection. Our collection is online. Anybody that wants to go there can visit. And I'll share more with you about that in a minute. Let me pause it. Let me share something first that I'm going to need to explain. I'm going to say some things today that may sound like I'm bragging. I'm not bragging. I don't claim credit for what God has done through me. But He has done things through us that have caught the attention of the entire scientific community. And I'm going to share those with you. And if it sounds like I'm bragging, I'm sorry. That's not my intent. It's just to let you know what God has done through us. So excuse me if it doesn't all come out right. So we just want to know about why this big pile of bones is here. This is where we are. That's Wyoming in the upper left corner there. And we are down here in Niobrara County, which is the lower right corner of the diagram. Niobrara County has the distinction of being the least populated county in the least populated state in the United States. So there are many, many more cows than there are people in Niobrara County. And that's where we work. This was our field station, was built in the year 2000. It was 12 square feet of very primitive structure, but it had men's and women's bathrooms and a kitchen and a little meeting room. Mostly we met outside in that tent in the background. Weather in Wyoming is astonishing. Here one day we saw a tornado out in the field. We often encountered them in this area, but according to the people that know, nobody has ever been hurt by a tornado in Wyoming. So I assume that's still true today. And this was our field station where it got hit by something when we weren't there. It was gone. That was about 2018, I think, 2018 maybe. We came back from the season. We're out there for a month, the month of June, and we came back the next June to nothing. For a year ahead of time, we had already been planning on building a new field station because this one was having problems with the roof leaking. And so when we found out we had nothing, we went to the oil industry and we rented a couple of man camps. And we made it through 2 seasons with those man camps while this building took fruition and eventually got started building. And we were there in June 2023. It wasn't completed, but we could use some of the facilities to manage with. And this is, oops, what I do. Yeah, there. This is this last summer when we were there. Isn't that pretty? A rainbow of promise. And I've looked at both ends to see if there are dinosaur bones there. There aren't. So no pot of gold either. Typical season, we have as many people in camp at once. I'd say the average population is around 60. It's a big operation. And we need a big facility. Our new facility is 7,000 square feet. It has a complete kitchen in it. It has a dining area that opens to the outside, and it has resources for bathrooms and showers and locker room and other things that we needed. So we are very well equipped right now, and if you come next year, you'll take advantage of the wonder of this new facility. But you can see we have a lot of different people of a lot of different ages that are working on these dinosaur bones from all over the world. And I'll say more about that later. That's me on Dr. Maloney is the current director. Dr. Snyder is the head of the biology department at Southern. So he is also one of our leaders. So we have manifested cooperation between Adventist colleges, which we're very proud of. Other people, Mike Harris, Justin Woods, Rebecca Lundquist, Stephen Gray, and Wallace Sullivan. Some of you may even know some of those people. And there are others that are involved. These people come every year. 15 years is not unusual for these people. Once you get addicted to this, you keep coming back. Stephen, for example, he just came 1 year with some of his students, a couple of students, just to be with the students while they were having this experience. And he's been back every year since. So be careful if you come. These are the dinosaurs that we have in Montosaurus, and that is a 40-foot long duck-billed dinosaur, a plant-eating dinosaur. And that's what mainly we find in the big bone bed. Here's what it looks like when we get to it, well, except that they're all disarticulated. Anzu is the oviraptor, Anzu wiley. You may not know how big that is, but it can look in a second-story window. Nanotyrannus, nano means small, and Tyrannus, this is a T-Rex-like animal that's smaller than T-Rex. We have most of the skeleton of that. We have the second one that was ever found, we found on our dig. There's what he looks like. Dromaeosaurs, those are the raptors. Nodosaurus is this giant lumbering tank of an animal, is all I can say. Here's the skeleton. Look at his front legs. He looks like an armadillo. What do armadillos do? They dig in the ground, right? If you've ever had armadillos in your property, it's a sad day because they dig up everything. But look at those front legs. They look like they're designed for digging. They're very stout. And he's completely armored all the way across with that inch-thick armor. Pachycephalosaurus. Pachy means thick. Cephalo means head. The thick-headed dinosaur. Here you can see what he looks like. We found a skull of one of these early on in our experience. I couldn't believe it was all bone, but it is all the way through. We x-rayed it. It's solid bone, 8 inches thick. Struthiomimus, the ostrich-like dinosaur. Struthius is the genus of ostrich. Mimic means like, so ostrich-like. Thescelosaurus is a sheep-sized dinosaur. This is the first dinosaur we found where we had the whole animal there. That's what he looks like. Triceratops. Tri means three, cera means horns. Tops. So he has 3 horns on his head. The head itself may weigh 1,000 pounds. Can you imagine carrying around 1,000 pounds on your neck? Massive, 7 feet long. 7 feet long, that's bigger than this, from one end to the other of that. Little tiny called Troodon, Pictinodon, and of course Tyrannosaurus Rex. And there you have a full-sized adult for, oh no, that's a little kid. Here I show a picture of a colleague, a friend of mine, Olawole Wije from Africa. He has a PhD in geology, and he's been here a couple of times, and wherever I go in Africa, I was in Nigeria last year and South Africa this year, and he's there wherever I am to testify to the Creator. So what are we trying to learn? We're looking at taphonomy. Taphonomy is the science of everything that happened to an animal from the time it's alive walking around until you dig it up. So that includes what was it doing when it died, how did it die, what happened after it died, how fast was it buried, and what happened to the bones after they were buried. All of these are included in taphonomy. Taphonomists today are often hired by CSI, crime scene investigators, to go out to a site where a body is found and tell how long ago the body died, how long ago the person died, and what was the cause of death if they can determine that, and those kinds of things. That's what taphonomy is. There are schools that teach this. University of Texas, El Paso is one of these, and they use cadavers sometimes, but they also will use pigs, and they'll put them out in the woods, and then they will come and check on them every day and see what changes have taken place so they can learn what the systematics of degradation are so that they can then work their way back to how long ago the person died. One day they did this. They took a pig out in the woods. They came back 2 days later, and it was nothing but a skeleton. They had no clue what was going on, so they put another pig out there, and they put a camera there, and after they left, a flock of vultures came in, and they completely cleaned it down to bone in just 2 days. So that's what taphonomists do. All right, so let's do a scorecard now. What progress have we made toward our objective? Preserve data that was being lost due to erosion. So far, we've collected and curated almost 40,000 bones. Actually, we're well over 40,000 if you count the microfossils, which we've added this last year on a study we're doing on microfossils. Microfossils are fossils that are too small to see easily with your unaided eye. So for these, we usually do screen washing, where you take the dirt and shovel it into a screen, shake the screen, and then put that into water and wash it, and then put it back through the screen, and then you have some stuff left over, and then you look at it under the microscope and try to identify it. And this one site, there are special sites where you do this. There's called microsites, and this one site we've been exploring. We got over 500 teeth of just one dinosaur, so little tiny teeth that big. So we're well over 40,000 by now. So we still have a lot more in that category. Right now, if you go out there, you won't see bones laying all over the ground anymore, but you'll see bones sticking out of the ground. And so we will continue to dig as long as there are bones there. And of course, the more you dig, the more bones you expose. The more bones you expose, the more you have to take out of the ground. So we'll keep having stuff to take out of the ground into the future. We have excavated maybe 1/100th of what there is to do. To set a high standard for research in paleontology, showing that those who believe in the scriptural account of origins can do excellent science. Does that sound like a noble objective? Okay, you know how I solved this one? On my knees. I knew that I could not do it. So I prayed about it. I said, God, what would you have me do? Here's the challenge. These guys are making fun of you. When they make fun of us, they're making fun of you. How are we going to solve this problem? And things fell into my lap. We developed technology using GPS. You know what that is? You have it on your watch. I have it on my watch. I have it on my phone. I have it in my car. Everybody has GPS everywhere now. Back then, this was 1997. It wasn't so well known, but they were just beginning to develop GPS technology that would allow you to accurately record the positions of surveying points. And so we went to those people. I had about $15,000 that had been donated to me to buy equipment. And I went to the company that makes the equipment. They said, oh, that's $30,000 or $40,000. I said, well, I'm developing a new technology that'll sell a lot of your instruments if you will make it possible for us to get the equipment. And for $15,000, I got my first GPS equipment. We then decided that we could use that data about the position of the bones along with a picture of the bone and cement that in place using GIS software so that we could reconstruct the quarry with the bones just the way they were in the ground in the computer. So you can actually look and see where the bones are without the dirt there. Nobody else had ever done this before in paleontology. So here's how it works. We have a base station. That base station knows exactly where it is on the surface of the earth, within a few millimeters. Now, land is moving. We're all moving. Everything's moving. And so that position's going to change. But as long as we use this base, we're going to be relatively in the same position. So it knows where it is. It calculates, it reads a constellation of satellites, it calculates a position, and then it sends that information over a radio to the receiver at the other end, which is a rover, which we carry around with us to measure bones. So you put it on the bone and you click an enter button, and it takes a reading on a bunch of satellites, the same satellites that the base took a reading on, and then it takes the correction factor from the and applies it to the data, And we get results like this. That's 1 centimeter, 10 points in it, taken on the same place. So our accuracy is plus or minus 2 or 3 millimeters. Plenty accurate to record the positions of bones. So that's what we do then. We take a reading on the bones. It goes directly into the computer. We take a picture of the bone, extract the surroundings, and then orient that bone to the bones and stick it in position. We developed this whole technology on how to do this. And so now what we can do is magic. We can take this bone along with the other bones in that quarry and reconstruct the distribution of bones in the quarry. When I first gave this talk at a meeting, scientific meeting, and I presented the pictures I'm going to show you in a minute, there were audible gasps in the audience because nobody had ever been able to do this before. Nobody had ever figured out how to do this. And when they saw the thing that they could most, which is to see the bones in the ground without the dirt there, they were shocked. And I wasn't the only one that heard the gasps in the audience. There were several people there that told me this afterwards. It was astonishing to these people. So here we have some of our listed on there, and that blue dot is the main quarry, and I'm just going to show you what it looked like over the years. Let's see if I can do this. So this is 1999, and then I'll step quickly through this. There's 2000, 2001, 2002, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and now we're going to change to a white background and make more room. 2009, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, and I don't have 24 in there yet because I'm still working on it. That's what I have to do when I get back. If you can see those red dots, those are 1 meter scale, just to give you an idea. These are not tiny bones. Those biggest bones in there are this big, 1.5 meters. So this is the history of the quarry, and you can see just how much digging we do here. If you come and work with us, your bones will show around the periphery of that. So it's an ongoing process. But this is the pictures. These are the pictures I showed that caused these people to gasp. Not all these, but the number that we had that year. In addition to just doing the work in the field by these new technology, we've given papers at national meetings for over 20 years on our research. For the first 10 years, nobody would come up and say boo to me because they all knew we were creationists. Everybody knew it. The one good thing about this whole experience was the guy that was there that left was happy to tell everybody, all the other paleontologists, that we were creationists. So everybody knew we were creationists. Then when we started showing science, they were afraid of us for a number of years. They were afraid to talk to us. So I'd go to these meetings, scientific meetings or other kinds of meetings you go to. You go to interact with your colleague. There was no interaction. And then after about 10 years, people started coming up. They saw we were still there. We were still doing good science. They came up and started talking to us. And I am really good hugging friends with a number of these paleontologists. And it's not a result of me. It's a result of our commitment to share Jesus with these people. And after 20 years, I now go to the meetings with a degree of celebrity. Not full acceptance, but at least they are happy to see us there, to see what's new. Our original methods that we developed, let's see if this is still working, are published in a respected journal of taphonomy. So everybody, excuse me, anybody that wants to can see how we did it. So our methodology is now in the literature. That had a hard path to get into the literature too, because the first paper I sent in, they sent it back and said, "You're creationists." They probably get sued for that today, but that's been about 10 years ago, and they got away with it. I'm not going to sue them. I'm just saying that they really would have to be more discreet today. So that paper was a big thing to get into the literature. Now we have established our methodology firmly established in the literature. We also developed a online catalog, and we published a paper on that method as well. How do we make available all this information to anyone that wants to know it? And so we have another publication on that. This was in Geological Society of America. These are not second-rate places we're putting our publications. In fact, here's a number of papers, finally culminating in the one at the bottom in the PLOS One journal, which is a very highly respected journal, and we made a lot of waves when we published that paper. But we have other papers right now in press. We have papers in press, we have papers that are written, ready to submit, and we have papers that we're working on. So we probably have, I'd say, 8 papers right now that are coming up. We made the cover of Paleos, the most respected paleontology journal in the world. They put it on the cover not because they wanted to, but because nobody else in the world had anything like this. And when we published a paper in their journal, they said, they asked us, can we put this picture on the cover? And I said, no, I didn't. I said, sure. And so we were excited to have that happen. It wasn't just that aspect of our work that's gotten recognition. Our methods, yes. But the top paleontologist, dinosaur paleontologist in the world, took an interest in our work. He wasn't ashamed to come and visit us. He came down to our lab in Keene. He wanted to know how we did all the things we were doing. Then he was the director of the Houston Museum of Natural History at that time. He sent down his museum staff to learn from us, this little college here in Keene, to learn from us how to take care of data and research data. And so these 5 people came down from the Houston Museum of Science to learn from us. And I remember having them sit in my office, and one of them asked, how can you afford to do all these things you do? And I remembered a story in the Bible about a man named Hezekiah who had a visit from the agents of Babylon. And do you remember what happened to him? He showed them all the riches of the kingdom, and they came and took them. And I thought, that's not what I want to happen here. So I prayed in my head, just like Nehemiah prayed before the king. I prayed a living prayer while I was there, and they'd asked the question. And my answer was, I can't really tell you except to say that God has done it. And there was total silence in the room for seemed like a minute. And then one of them said, well, I guess that's as good an answer as any. It was true. God provided us with what we needed, but I couldn't tell him where I got the funding from or what the source was, It was just there when we needed it. So I felt like I was at least truthful. And he makes this statement, I was astounded. I've never seen before such a precise and comprehensive data management system for field paleontology and for the lab. No other museum or university comes close for dinosaur digs. This is the top paleontologist on dinosaurs. If I gave you his name, you'd know him. Thanks for sharing your expertise. And then another paleontologist who is well known in paleontology, there's been a movie made about his life. He said to me, I must say, every time I go to your website, that you have the best site for looking at your collection of any institution. And that's nice to have compliments from individuals. And then it was published in a research paper on dinosaur bones from the Lance Formation. And here's his statement. He went to all the museums in the world looking for bones from these two formations. He said only 9 of 55 institutions, these are things like the British Museum and the Smithsonian and all these, LA County Museum, University of Washington, Burke Museum, U.S. National Museum, National Center for Science Museum, OMNH, I don't know what that is. But the next one, SWAU, yeah, I know that one. SWAU is Southwestern Adventist University. That's where I am. That's among the 9 that had an online database system that was reasonably up to date and fully functional at the time of the study. Also on that list are University of California, that's Berkeley, Museum of Paleontology, University of California Museum, and Yale Peabody Museum. Then he said, of those surveyed, University of Washington, Burke Museum, University of California Museum of Paleontology, LA County Museum, Yale Peabody Museum, and what? SWAU? Stood out as providing the most detail in the easiest and most aesthetic format. SWAU in particular provided photographs, historical, geologic context for just about every specimen in the large and mostly complete database. Can I say the best in the world? You know? Can God take this and make that happen? You know? It's not me, I can guarantee you that. But God can do what He will do. So I thought I'd take a minute just to show you what our database looks like and why it's so highly regarded. The frontispiece that you get to, and by the way, it's just fossil.swau.edu. It's very easy to find, fossil.swau.edu. If you don't go there, you're missing a real treat. It's got some fossils on the front called featured fossils, but then when you go into the collections and you click on Browse, this page comes up. It's just some of the bones, pictures of the bones in the laboratory, and then you can put in that search bar up there anything you want. If you have been there and have excavated and put your name in, it will bring up all the bones that you found. If you want to know about femurs of dinosaurs, you can put that in. Anything you'd like to search on, you can search on. I'm going to put 838 in there because that's a spectacular jaw of a Nanotyrannus, the maxillary of a Nanotyrannus. So I put that in, it brings up the picture. I click on the picture, and it gives me all the metadata on the right-hand side. That's all the information relevant for that bone, the size, what it is, where it was found, which quarry, who found it, who identified it, who prepared it, and then any other metadata that's associated with that bone. It also shows a picture of the bone, and then there are 4 boxes down at the bottom. You click on the first box, it shows you a picture of the bone in the field. This is what it looked like in the ground. You click on the second box, and it shows you a 360-degree picture of the bone. And actually, this is a movie I made of it, so it's not in real time, but I don't know, is it not going to run? It may not run. Oh, it did? Okay. Let me try coming from this side. Oh, okay. Oh, okay. So there you can see it rotating in 360 degrees. Try that at the Smithsonian or the Washington Museum or anywhere else in the world. You're not going to see it. But we have really good quality pictures, 360-degree rotation. You can stop it, you can back it up, you can zoom in and zoom out on it. So these are interactive pictures as well. That's pretty cool, huh? Why did that? Because in 2003, I think it was, I submitted our website to a site at Berkeley that purported to show all the fossils in the world. Anybody that had a web page with a fossil picture on it could submit their site, and it would be put up on their website that was sponsored by the U.S. government. I sent them our URL. They sent me back a letter the next day saying that they'd gotten it and that it would be up shortly. And I looked 2 weeks later, it wasn't there. I looked 2 weeks later, it wasn't there. So I wrote them back, I said, I can't find it. And they said, oh, did we tell you that we were going to put it up on our website? Now, mind you, nobody else in the world has data like this on their website. And so they said, oh, no, we haven't made a decision yet. A month later, I get a letter saying that our site had been rejected because it was neither scientific nor educational. What do you think is behind that? So, I don't get mad. I don't get mad. My wife may do something that I don't like. I smile and try to get around it. I don't get mad, but I was mad. So I decided, okay, we'll put 360-degree pictures on there. So that's how that got started. It wasn't because I was so smart. It was because I got mad. And God gave me an outlet for my anger. So I never bothered to resubmit it after that because we had far better material on our website than they did. But anyway, that's a side. Then along came 360-degree pictures and 3D printers. So we decided we would add a facility to allow people to print their own bones. So we made pictures. And right now we have, as of last week, we have over 7,000 of these. Each of them has a downloadable file that you can print on your 3D printer. So if you want to make a dinosaur bone, help yourself. Download the picture and print it out. Download the STL file and you can print it out. Yes? What's that? Yes, that's exactly right. Yeah, you can see through these, and because they're real 3D models, they're virtual 3D models, you can move them around until you see the holes. I could show you, if we had time and you had internet here, I could show you some bones that big that you can climb inside of. It's pretty amazing. And last of all, and this is something else you'll never find at any other facility, you can see where that bone was found. Picture of the quarry. There's the quarry map, 1 meter grid, and those green dots show you where this maxillary was found relative to all the other bones. So you can literally do research on the online site. And again, this is all things that you can't do at the Smithsonian or anywhere else. So, what have we gotten done? What have we accomplished? We wanted to learn more about the dinosaurs. We've learned a lot more. We've published papers describing models for how these dinosaur bones got there. And you can ask me about that in question and answer if you want, but it's our understanding is better than the understanding up until that point, which was dinosaurs drowned crossing a river, and they were carried downstream to a bend in the river where they accumulated. That's how you get a bone bed. Standard explanation. It's applied, rubber stamped, onto every site that has a bunch of bones. We have shown that our bones are in a graded bed. A graded bed means big bones at the bottom, little bones at the top. That can only happen if distribution takes place underwater, catastrophically. So we have taken a scenario that could have enveloped thousands and thousands of years and made it into one that is instantaneous. And we think that's an accomplishment. And the interesting thing is, after we published that we had graded bed in our quarry, guess what? All the other guys started finding, oh, our bones are in a graded bed too. They just hadn't noticed up until we described it in the literature. So now we have catastrophic emplacements all over the place of other quarries. We've altered the lives of our participants for the better. I've had many, many testimonies of people that have come out there to dig up dinosaur bones and instead have found Jesus, found a relationship with Jesus, found a life-changing experience, found people that really cared about them personally who were testifying to the importance of creation as a story in the Bible. So this is something that is beyond what I ever dreamed of when we first got started. Our last objective was to try to reach other paleontologists. And we don't do this by having evangelistic meetings. We do this by one-on-one contact and by faithfully representing Jesus in our demeanor and in our approach to paleontology and science, by being respectful, by being loving. And as I said, these paleontologists, the ones that I made friends with, we hug each other at the meetings. And one day I remember I was with a paleontologist. He's so famous that there's a little cloud of people that goes along with him wherever he goes. And when I come up to them, he says, "Here's my creationist friend." He makes sure everybody knows that he knows who I am. And one day, he and I and that other paleontologist who had a movie made about him were standing in the meetings in Salt Lake City talking about Jesus and our relationship to him and our faith. And I know God has more. This story's not finished yet. But my goal is to continue to represent him and to reflect Christ in all my interactions with these people. So, to summarize, an unusual and very rich bone bed in eastern Wyoming has given us an opportunity to promote God's view of creation, view of Earth history. We have, as a result of our work there, been able to preserve many, many of these bones that would be gone by now forever, would have been washed away. With God's blessing, we've been able to advance the science of paleontology in ways that are widely recognized by other paleontologists. And we're continuing to offer this experience to students, to scientists and educators and thought leaders from around the world. And just a little ad here, if anyone's interested. If you'd like to come and join us, you are welcome to do so. You have to be a certain age to come. You can't be older than I am. No, you can be as old as you want. In fact, my student, Tetsuya Yamamoto, who worked on the fossil forest, he's older than I am by several years. And he was here last year working on dinosaur bones again. He comes every year from Japan. There is some financial support for cash-strapped students and for educators and others who are involved in teaching young people or leading out in the church. We dedicate the month of June each year to this project. And we have had people from all over the world. I'm going to read off some of these, if I can read them. Romania, Georgia, that's Soviet Georgia, Italy, Germany, Netherlands, Uganda, Kenya, Nigeria, Rwanda, Peru, Argentina, Brazil, Chile, Colombia, Venezuela, Uruguay, Mexico, Honduras, Philippines, Puerto Rico, Thailand, India, Japan, Korea, China, and all over the United States as well. So you will not only have an experience with dinosaur bones, but you will interact with a rich community of believers and non-believers who are living together for a month. You don't have to stay for a month. You can come for a week or a day, but take advantage of this. It's in your neighborhood. It's just right up here. So at least come and visit us. Father's Day is open house. You can come and see all the bones laid out and just enjoy the day together. But if you want to come enjoy the experience, you have to come for longer than that. Here's websites that you might be interested in. Creation evolution issues is called origins.swau.edu. Our online fossil museum is fossil.swau.edu. And if you want to come and dig, it's dinosaur.swau.edu. Easy to remember. Okay, I will be happy to entertain questions about this, about any of my other talks, or just things that you've been wanting to know that I might have some light about. Yes?
Children digging them up. So apparently they're not as fragile as what they once thought. Maybe? I don't know.
Well, number one, we train our participants first. So you'll get some training. It's just like Mr. Romwell was telling me today, when he flies a new plane, he has to get training in that plane. Just because he can fly a plane doesn't mean he can fly that plane. And it's the same way with these kids. I mean, they've dug up their backyards looking for dinosaur bones, but that's not the techniques they'll use here. So we train very carefully all the participants so they have that background. Number two, bones are repairable. If they're broken, we can fix them. We don't want them to be broken, but their bones aren't as important as people's lives, and that's why we're there. So from our perspective, we have lots of bones, not so many people. Let's take care of the people and fix the bones. So if somebody does break something, we don't want that to happen, but if it happens, we can deal with it. And thirdly, we do have a lot of bones. You're right. Yes?
You've been able to date what dating method do you use, and what have you been able to date the bones, and do they date back to the flood?
That's a tricky question. The only method you could use for dinosaur bones would be carbon-14 dating, and carbon-14 dating, radiocarbon dating doesn't give dates back more than 50,000 years. 40,000 years, and no paleontologist who believes in the standard model thinks that's long enough to date a bone, so they don't date them. Some dinosaur bones have been dated by radiocarbon dating by a group in Germany. They subsequently were ostracized by their community, and they were shut off by the radiocarbon labs so that they wouldn't let them date any more bones because they were getting dates of 20,000 years, 25,000 years, 30,000 years, dates like that. And they were saying, look, here's evidence that these bones aren't millions of years old because they still have radiocarbon in them. But the most telling argument about the age of the bones is the existence, as I mentioned last night, the existence of protein, DNA, maybe DNA, I don't know for sure about that, but the proteins, not just collagen, but other proteins as well, blood vessels, blood cells inside these bones. And there is no way that any physical method would allow for dates that old, for the existence of those proteins in bones that were millions of years old. So millions of years does not work for dinosaur bones. So the more we study this, the more kinds of proteins that we can isolate from these bones, the more we'll be able to say something about exactly how old they are. So I can't tell you except that they are, in my estimation, they're things that died during the flood, if that helps you. Yes.
I have two questions. So one is, if you want to go up and participate in the dig, how do you go about doing that? Do you go to one of these sites?
Go to dinosaur.swal.edu. It's all online. I have a brochure or two left in my briefcase I can give you afterwards if you want. I didn't bring any, dumb me. I know it's okay to say, it's not okay to say somebody else is dumb, but I guess you can apply it to yourself when you goof up. But I didn't think of that. But if you go to dinosaur.swau.edu, you'll find all the information about next year's dig. I don't know that it's open yet for next year, but if you want to come next year, I would definitely get in early because we had the Pathfinders there this year, and there's going to be a lot of competition for the spots.
Okay, my other question is, why do you think they're there in that particular area? And does it have anything to do with the proximity to Yellowstone?
The second question, no, it doesn't, in my estimation, because Yellowstone didn't exist yet when this happened. The other question is, how did they get there like that? And I'll just kind of quote what we wrote in the paper. This is published in the secular literature, so I didn't mention anything about Noah. But we suggested that they drown. And as good vegetarians, when they would drown, they're going to bloat. And when they bloat, they're going to float. And when they float, they're going to make good sails. And the wind is going to drive them up onto a shoreline somewhere, and they're going to accumulate there. So that's what we suggested. They rotted there for a while. They were actually predated by T-Rex, scavenged by T-Rex and other scavengers. We know that because we find the broken off teeth of T-Rex and Nanotyrannus and Dromaeosaurus among these bones. So we know for sure that there were still other dinosaurs alive, and we have their tracks just a couple miles away from the dig site. There's some tracks of live dinosaurs. So this was happening during the flood, but not at the very end of the flood when everything, the breath of life was dead. So that's our explanation. And then that whole mass of rotting dinosaur bones from thousands of dinosaurs was remobilized by probably an earthquake. As you know, San Francisco sits on basically a bog. And if they have an earthquake in San Francisco, it shakes and water seeps up into the sediments. It becomes a liquid, and all that big old pyramidal building. The reason it's a pyramid is so they can get out on the top. But that's what happens when you shake a mixture of water and sand. It will become a liquid, and it will flow. And so we suggested that these bones were remobilized by an earthquake and transported out into the basin where they sorted into this graded bed and were buried in deeper water.
Yeah,
Is that true? Well, this is paleontology, and paleontology, everything is stories. Why? Because nobody was there. You have some data, you have to make it into a story, and that's our story. Yeah.
Yeah, I have a question. And I mentioned to you today, is there any scientific data that would substantiate
okay? I'll divulge a lot of things in this particular answer. Number one, dinosaurs were created. We know that because they were alive, and all life comes from God. Satan, if he could make life, he would have done it long ago. That, in fact, is what inspired him to want to be worshiped, because worship indicates what? Creation. So he wanted to be a creator. If he could make life, he would do it. God hasn't given him that ability. That's why he can't make life. So anything that's alive ultimately came from God. In fact, as an aside, one of the ironic things that is kind of like a slap in the face to Lucifer, what privilege did God give to the human race that probably doesn't exist anywhere else in the universe? That's right. The ability to create new life. He gave it to us. And I imagine that was such an affront to Satan, because that's all he ever wanted, was to be the creator, to have people to worship him. And God gave that privilege to us. That is awesome to think about. Anyway, that's an aside. Back to your question. Are they modified? The best answer I can give to you on that is Job 40, which talks about Leviathan and Behemoth especially. Behemoth had the following characteristics. It ate grass like an ox. It lived in the waters. It had its strength in its hips, which means it walked on two legs. It had a tail like a cedar tree. Am I building a dinosaur? Yeah, that's right. And God says it was the first of the creation of God. So, did God create them? Yes. Are they the same as what he made? Some of them probably are. Just like some things in nature today haven't changed very much. You look at some of these amazing birds, like the kestrel and others, the quetzal, and others, and you see they can't have moved very far from where God created them, because how could they be any more beautiful than they are? So some things maintained that closeness to the original creation. Other things may have changed dramatically. And of course, we think of T-Rex and things like that. They probably didn't go around eating people when they were first created. So, yes, God made them. They were dinosaurs. And we think there'll be dinosaurs in heaven, right? What kid doesn't want to have a dinosaur when they get to heaven? Yeah, I think God has preserved them. Oh, the other question is, were they on the ark? While we're on the subject. Ellen White says there was a class of very large animals before the flood. There is no other class of very large animals besides dinosaurs. A class of very large animals before the flood that God did not see fit to preserve in the ark. Not because they weren't his creation, but because man in his weakened condition after the flood would be wiped out by him. She doesn't use that word, that's my word. But it's clear. A T-Rex lays 25 eggs. Next year there's 25 T-Rexes. Next year there's 600 T-Rexes. There's only the same number of humans. What's going to happen? They run out of food, they get hungry, there's humans. They could easily wipe out humanity. So God said, well, we'll just save them for later. I'm speaking for God, I'm sorry. That's just a guess. Yes?
So in all this digging of bones, how come we haven't found large human bones that prove the existence of giants, pre-flood?
Yeah, we're all the giant humans. Well, if you look on the internet, you can find them. Any of you ever seen those giant humans? Somebody started a contest to produce giant humans in Photoshop, and a whole bunch of people entered that contest, and those pictures are all over the web. And their goal was to disrupt creationists, by the way. That's why they did that contest. But the question comes back, why don't we find giant humans? We're looking for them. If we ever find one, we'll be happy to let you know. But what's that? We're in Upper Cretaceous. I really don't expect to see human tracks there, human beings there. I think they probably were the last things to die. And if they were the last things to die, they're going to be at the surface of the earth, and they're going to rot and decay quickly. And then maybe they're buried deeply in the earth to get rid of them. God said, let us destroy man whom we have created from off the face of the earth. And so far, he's done a good job. We haven't found any. It doesn't mean we won't before this is over. I suspect that when probation is closed, God may make some revelations that will surprise us. But not things that will compel people to believe. A human skeleton, a giant human skeleton found appropriately in the fossil record would be compelling evidence. And I don't think that's God's goal, because Jesus said, when the Son of Man comes, will he find faith on the earth? And faith is a commitment without the evidence, a commitment based on experience, a relationship, but without physical evidence, or without all the physical evidence we'd like. And that's challenging to all of us. I always tell people, lay people in meetings like this, lay people are always asking, well, what about this? What about this? What about this? And my answer is, folks, if I had all those answers, I'd be out of business. Because scientists have to have questions that are unanswered in order to go forward. So we would be out of business if we didn't have unanswered questions. So for scientists not to have all the answers is a good thing. Do you understand that? But it's not true for lay people, because they want to have every question answered. And we all need to learn to live without all the answers. We have enough evidence to support our perspective so that God doesn't need to answer every question we have right now. And He really wants to be proud of us. He wants to say, look, she believed without me showing her what she wanted. She still believed in me, even though I didn't give her that evidence. And so I think it's really beautiful for us to believe in God when we still have unanswered questions. Does that make sense? I know it's not satisfying, but does it make sense? And to me, it does. Of course, I'm a scientist, so I have that perspective.
Dr. Jack Horner is trying to create a dinosaur from a chicken egg, calling it Chickenosaurus. Yale and Harvard have put teeth back in a chicken's mouth. And Ellen White says in Spiritual Gifts, Volume 3, that if there was one crime upon another that caused for the destruction of the race by the flood, it was the base crime, I would say, of GMO, genetically modified lizard. We see similarities. Evolution says birds evolved from dinosaurs. I've seen 40 similarities between, they have wishbones, they have gizzards, they have all similarities. And so she said if there's one crime of another, it was the base crime of amalgamation of man and beast. And then she goes on to say that all the creatures God created were destroyed by the flood. The confused creatures which God did not create were destroyed by the flood. Now, it's in Spiritual Gifts, Volume 3, page 75, I think, and page 64, where she makes those two statements. And, I mean, T-Rex, who would eat everything he'd catch. The ballistics people tell us T-Rex, you need an AK-47 will not bring down T-Rex. You need an RPG, rocket-propelled grenade, in the Garden of Eden. But based on what Ellen White says, it was one crime of another. And the Bible says that as in the days of Noah, we're doing it today. We're doing every kind of human-animal hybrid, human-cow hybrid, human-pig hybrid, human-monkey hybrid. And the Bible says, I think every creature had corrupted their way in Genesis 6. I think they were genetically modified. I think,
as it was in the days of Noah, so shall it be at the days of the coming of the Son of Man. So, yes, I'll just say a word about that. How many of you can tell me what you see in pictures depicting the apple tree in the Garden of Eden? What is it in there? A snake. But remember, snakes didn't exist until God cursed them to go on their bellies. So what was in the tree? Not a snake. It was probably something with beautiful feathers. I don't know, that maybe could fly. How did it get in the tree? It wasn't a snake. Because what is the curse if it already went on his belly? So there is that. So I don't know if it was a dinosaur-like thing or not. Maybe it was a snake-like thing that had wings. I don't know. I have no insight on that. But I do not think it was a serpent in the tree, right? Would that attract a woman today? There was something in that tree that was beautiful that attracted her, that after the curse went on its belly. That's all I know. You can imagine that in some way you'd like to.
Actually, I think have you seen Sean Boonstra's sermon he did at ASI this year? That might answer that question. It's humans started acting like animals. And anyway, that's
We're not like that today, are we?
right. So anyway, my question is the original rancher still there that brought you in the beginning? And do you have pictures of those bones laying on top of the ground from back then, what you saw? It would be, I think, I would love to find a picture of that original state it was in, just to see what you got to see that first day.
Yeah, that's a good idea. I hadn't thought of that. Yeah, I'm sure I have pictures of that. The original rancher died in the early 2000s, I think. He died a happy man in Jesus. And his daughter is now, she's my age. She kids me that she's much younger than me, but it's only a few months. But we're that close. We talk to each other on the phone. She calls and talks to me about various times during the year. It's always, where are you tonight? Because I'm never home. I travel a lot. Yes.
I have a question about radiocarbon dating. When I was younger, I thought that radiocarbon dating couldn't tell us anything at all just because it can't, 50 or 70,000 years on this side. But you said something that triggered a question from my recent research. My understanding, tell me if I'm right or wrong, is that the reason that radiocarbon dating can't tell us anything past 70,000 years is because the half-life of radiocarbon is so short that by 50 or 60 or 70,000 years, there's no more radiocarbon molecules left. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that doesn't say that radiocarbon can't tell us nothing, right?
Oh, yeah. It's very useful.
If we can get any age below 70 or 50,000 years, that tells us they're not 65,000 or 65
Yeah.
years old, right?
Yes, other than the idea that there's contamination by radiocarbon in the modern environment.
That's their explanation.
That would be out there if you tried to make an issue out of it.
Okay, so
Yeah, radiocarbon is very useful. We pay a lot of attention to it, but it doesn't always mean what they say it means.
So is that the only explanation that an evolutionist with a long, long time scale would give, is that somehow the dinosaur bones were contaminated with
Yeah.
radiocarbon? Okay.
Yeah, or the machine was contaminated, or the sample was contaminated. Somewhere along the line, they picked up some radiocarbon, which is not hard. The air is full of it right now, and much more than any bone that's 70,000 years old. So when they do that, they would try to get inside the bone where you can't get modern contamination. And typically that's what they'll do. They'll drill into the bone and get some stuff out from the middle. And it only takes milligrams of material to do a radiocarbon date. But of course, if it's very old like that, they're going to use a bigger sample more chance for contamination.
We got green here.
Yeah,
Okay. So what little I've read, it seemed like the evolutionary paleontologists, it seemed like one of the things that they're foundational on is the geologic column and you know, Cambrian on up and so forth. Do you see flaws with that geologic column explanation that's used?
no. I think it's pretty much something you can depend on worldwide. If I find a layer here and I find a fossil in it, and I know where that fossil is found, I can go over there and look and find it in the same layer. And this is pretty much worldwide. So there was, whatever the flood entailed, the one model that doesn't work is what I call the wearing blender model, where you throw everything in, you push the button, and then pour it out. That's not what happened during the flood. There was a gradual increase in the amount of water available, and the depositional processes were gradually increasing from the Cambrian on up through the Paleozoic and into the Mesozoic. And it started taking, it was mostly marine things at the bottom. They were in the ocean. That was filled up first. So those marine fossils were buried. Then we started to bury land fossils, and then finally up into dry land fossils, and the dinosaurs last to that. And of course that picture is interrupted by episodes of marine deposition where you've had land deposition, so you can have, as in the case in Wyoming, we have a layer underneath us, which is marine. So somehow there was access to some marine sediments for a while, and then there are land terrestrial sediments on top of that. But the integrity of the geologic column is pretty well established. And I think if we don't use it, it's to our own harm, because we can't communicate with secular geologists if we decide, well, I'm not going to call this Cretaceous, I'll call this post-flood. Well, that means nothing to a secular geologist, so we have to use something we can communicate with in order to talk to other people. If I suddenly decided I was going to use Tagalog or Chinese instead of English to talk to you, it would be disruptive of our communication. Yes?
What happened when the dinosaurs, like when the dinosaurs were in the water, like the water dinosaurs, and when the flood came, how did the dinosaurs die? Because they were in water.
That's right. That's an interesting story. If you look at dinosaur pictures from the 1950s, most of the dinosaurs will be in water. We know that dinosaurs such as T-Rex and Apatosaurus and Brontosaurus and all those, we know that they were in water because we find their swimming strokes impressed in the mud in the bottom where they're actually swimming. But if you look in the 1950s, all the pictures were in water. But guess what? Scientists realized that sounds a lot like a flood. And so now all the dinosaurs are on land. And so there's been a transition from having dinosaurs live in aqueous environments to dinosaurs living in terrestrial environments, land. And that's been because of the Bible. It's been a transition to get them all onto land. Were they all on land? Okay, we have two other creatures that I can think of that have a duckbill. What are they? Platypus and duck. But what about the duck-billed dinosaur? Do you suppose it lived in land also? There's at least one fossil of the Edmontosaurus, the duck-billed dinosaur, that has webbed feet preserved, with the webbing on the feet. The argument against that is, oh, that's just skin that slipped down off the arm and covered the foot. It's not webbing. I leave you with the data and you can make your own decisions. Yes?
So this may or may not be, in fact, it's probably not related to dinosaurs, but the woolly mammoth and the saber-toothed tiger, it seems to also have a lot of people's attention, as with dinosaurs. What information do we have regarding that, and was that something that was pre-flood or after flood that went extinct?
We know that humans hunted mastodons and mammoths. We have bones that have human implements embedded in them. So, yes, they lived after the flood. Even Darwin, and I don't know what motivated him, I've never done this, looked into it, but I read the quotation where he suggested that you could generate 1 million mammoths starting with one pair in 1,000 years. Now, why is he doing that? Where does the idea of starting with one pair come from? The ark. Why would he care how long it takes to get 1 million of them? Well, we know there were 1 million of them out there, lots of them out there, and he wanted to know how long it would take. And in 1,000 years, you can have 1 million of them. So, yeah, reproduction works pretty well. And you can scale things up very quickly. So I think they're all post-flood. These are things that were Pleistocene and after Pleistocene. And Pleistocene glaciation is something that happened after the flood, maybe to take some of the water away from the sea and so on.
You may have answered most of this, my question already. During when the rains fell and the waters were rising, does it seem in the fossil record that the animals that were the largest and could run away were the last to die because they got to the top of the
Yeah.
mountains?
In fact, that's one of the enigmas of the fossil record. A lot of people, a lot of creationists want to end the flood at the Cretaceous. If they ended at the Cretaceous, there's no fossil mammals. I mean, there are these little tiny things up to opossum-sized that we find in with the dinosaurs, but nothing that we would recognize today. No horses, cows, pigs. All those fossils we find up in the Paleocene, Eocene, Oligocene, Miocene, up above the Cretaceous. I don't know the answer on that. I flip-flop back and forth on it. I'm very open with either possibility as long as you can fit it in time-wise. But it looks like some of the stuff after the dinosaurs, there must have been mammals floating around. A lot of mammal fossils we find are teeth. And the teeth are the first thing to fall out of your mouth. You may not realize this, but we've done taphonomic studies, Dr. Brand has done taphonomic studies, where you take animals, put them in a tank, and then record what happens to them. And the first thing that happens is teeth fall out. Maybe gases are generated in the socket, and then they push the tooth out. In water, at least, that's the case. So we find these mammal teeth. And then we also find their body remains and so on in other places. But teeth are the most common fossil. In fact, when I took vertebrate paleontology at University of California, our assignment over Christmas break was to take this cup of teeth and describe the environment that they lived in. That was my job. So I had to identify what all the teeth were, look up what all the animals were, and then build some kind of scenario for those animals, because teeth are very abundant. I don't know if that answers your question, but yeah. No, because they are transported with those animals. They would have been somewhere else. I think, yes.
So
You can't answer questions. You're in
my question is, you guys you had shown images of how the two-dimensional overlay of where the bones were located. Do you guys also have like three-dimensional renderings of that, so you see the the gradation of the bones, the large
Yeah.
ones at the bottom and the small ones at the top?
Yeah, we can do 3D renderings. It's very expensive in terms of computer resources. So we stick pretty much with the two. Unless somebody wants it, then we can try to do that. Yes.
Is it true that fossils of shells are found in the top of Mount Everest? And if this is true, what does that say about the formation of mountains over there?
Yes, it's true, and it's also true that Mount Everest was pushed up from below the sea up into the mountain itself. When India, I have a talk on plate tectonics, but I can't give it now. When India smashed into Asia, Mount Everest was pushed up. It must have been fast. It can't be slow. You can't move a quarter of a centimeter per year and make a mountain that's 25,000 feet high. That had to happen through some catastrophic event. And everybody agrees that India came up fast. It's just they're using different time frames than I am. But I think Mount Everest has sometimes been used by creationists, but not rightly, because it was on the bottom of the ocean. Yes.
Have you been able to find soft flesh in your discoveries?
Well, we haven't bothered to do this because there are people at Loma Linda working with us on that, and I don't know where they are in their progress. But we did do one study. We took a tendon. The tendons of these dinosaurs were bone. They were ossified tendons. We took one of those tendons and put it in EDTA, ethylene diamine tetraacetic acid, which is a chelating agent that takes all the calcium out. So the bone was gone, and there was a gelatinous mass left behind. I don't know what that was. We didn't test it, but clearly it's collagen. Collagen is what you make gelatin out of. And so you hydrolyze the gelatin, you hydrolyze the collagen and break it up in pieces, and then that makes jello. And that's what it looked like in the dish. So we think there's probably collagen there, but we haven't done any tests on it yet. I'm leaving that for those people out there.
Second question, where do you guys keep the bones when you find them? Do you keep them there in Wyoming? Or
No, they all go to the Dinosaur Science Museum and Research Center at Southwestern Adventist University. And it's a credible, it's relatively small, but people have come in there and they universally acclaim it as being a wonderful place to visit. So, yeah, if you ever get down there to Texas, y'all come and see us, and we'll show you our dinosaur bones. They aren't ours, actually. They belong to the ranch. But, yeah, I think probably, yes. Oh, okay. I'll wait. Yeah. Dinosaurs, like crocodiles, have annular rings in their bones. So you can count them just like you can count them in a tree. The only problem is, as the dinosaurs start to get too big, they remobilize their early bone. It gets dissolved and redeposited. So you lose some of that structure. But sometimes, one of the bones we did a section on of an Anotyrannus, we could clearly count that they were 7 or 8 years old. So that's probably a teenager, yeah.
So you're finding babies and
Yeah. But these are, most of the dinosaurs we find are adults. But there are only some of them that you can see ring data in, and those are because of remobilization. Apparently they all had them, but they lose them.
another question. Are there any other creationist scientists, like maybe one in Europe, or is it just your team, or it must be?
Well, I will say this. Leonard Brand and I, who are both Seventh-day Adventists, we've done most of the work in creation in our lifetime, in our productive careers. Leonard has had students at Loma Linda who are not Adventists. who have gone out and started geology programs at like Cedarville University and a university in LA. And they are now generating students who have the same search image that we do. They believe in the Bible account of creation, and they believe in doing science. Those two criteria have to be there in order to be successful. So they're doing science, these guys are doing science, but Leonard and I are the ones that kind of pioneered this methodology and this approach to science of actually doing science and letting the science speak for itself. So yeah, that's unfortunately the way it's been for our whole careers. Yeah, well, I mean, there's people like Kurt Wise. He has a PhD from Harvard University, worked with Stephen Gould, got his PhD there. He's a spokesperson for creation. He's a faithful creationist, but he hadn't done any research. And Steve Austin, who worked for ICR and then went out on his own and has a PhD from Penn State in geology. He hasn't really published anything either. If you don't publish, you're not doing science.
Has anyone converted over from evolution creation when they see your?
I wish I could chronicle something for you. I know this, that it's the work of the Holy Spirit to convert, and all we can do is present the data and let the Spirit work. And when the Spirit sends us somewhere, it must be for a reason. So I suspect there are people who have made a change in their perspective because of things we've said. I hope so. But that's not my job to do that part of it. That's God's job. And yeah. Yeah.
Are other people now doing that as well?
They're afraid to, because they'd be doing what creationists do. I look at it this way: every year we get a year farther ahead of everybody else, because this is what ultimately they're going to have to do, and we're the ones doing it. We're setting the stage. I think Bob Bacher has tried to implement this, but it's hard work. I spend a month after I get back just processing the data. It's not easy. Yeah, it works. Oh, back here, yeah.
Two questions. First one, how accurate do you think our depiction is of the dinosaurs on their exterior? Do you believe that they all are leathery like rhinos, hippos, etc., or did some of them have fur and feathers?
Okay. I think most dinosaurs were like lizards. They had bony. Some of them had bony plates in their backs, like alligators, and some of them we have their skin. This year in our quarry, we found quite a large patch of skin, probably of a Montosaurus. Last year we found skin the first 2 times, and there wasn't any indication of any integumentary material except for the scales. So I think probably most dinosaurs had scales. Did some of them have fur-like material on them? Well, you know, if you go away for the weekend, let's say in the summertime, you go away from the weekend and your goldfish dies. When you come back home, not only is it going to be floating upside down, but it's going to have fungus growing off of its back. And I think most of the cases where they have this fur on them, they haven't really tested. It's easy to tell if it's fungus or if it's fur, but I have never seen a paper that has documented the presence of fur in terms that you could identify as fur. Same thing for feathers. I remember I talked to some people about this 20 years ago when they were first claiming dinosaur feathers. I said, all you have to do is take one of these out, macerate it, and look under the microscope. You'll know if it's a feather or not. And as far as I know, nobody's ever even done that. They look at it, oh, that's a feather, case closed. And that's, not that I doubt there are dinosaurs that have feathers, but it just seems like the evidence ought to be a little more firmly committed. And your other question?
the other question is the geography up there. It appears that there are, when I first saw it, I thought it potentially was a petrified piece of wood, like a log, but I was told that it was a mud roll, and there are also mud balls. Can you explain why you think those exist, and were those created at the same time as the bones were deposited?
Yeah, we do have mud balls and mud rolls, and these are hardened mud. It's not really rock, it's just hard mud that indicate that mud material was picked up by the flow of water probably and rolled. And as it rolls, it makes this mud into a shape, and then they get preserved like that. And it really doesn't tell us very much except that it was transported by some kind of current. So mud was deposited somewhere, and then it was picked up by a current and transported and makes those mud rolls. Yes?
From a secular site for my husband, and one of them says, "The science doesn't lie." Well, it wasn't made for Christians, but he wears it.
The science doesn't lie.
Where you're digging up there in Wyoming, did you actually find some of those coverings like that look like an armadillo covering? Did you find pieces of that?
Yes.
And how do you know how to, I mean, of all the bones that you find, how do you know which bones to put together with which shape?
We don't have enough to put together a back of one of those things because they're all different sizes and shapes of those scales, those bony plates. We call them biscuits because they're that shape, and they usually have a ridge down the middle. And we've found probably 20 of them over the years, but we haven't tried to put anything together. Okay. Am I free? I'll be here if you have questions afterwards. But I really loved your questions. They're all intellectual. They're all worthy questions, and I love that. I don't have to answer the ones I sometimes get. Thank you.
I want to thank everybody for coming out today. Did everybody enjoy that, by the way? That was fantastic. We just want to thank you, Dr. Chadwick, on behalf of the entire Franktown Church and community and surrounding communities for coming out here, for giving this presentation. It is an honor to be able to host you today, and I feel blessed to have been here and to have an opportunity to hear more recent advancements. Let's go ahead and close off with a word of prayer. Precious Lord, we want to thank you. We want to thank you that you give us an opportunity for faith today. Lord, as Dr. Chadwick just mentioned, Lord, the opportunity for faith also implies that all the facts are not necessarily there. And yet at the same time, Lord, you appeal to us through relationship. You appeal to our hearts and to our minds. Lord, you're not willing that any should perish, but that all should come to repentance. And today, Lord, we give you our hearts. And we want to ask that you will guide our lives. And we ask that you will draw us ever nearer to you. And Lord, we want to ask that you give our lives tremendous purpose. At this hour in Earth's history, Lord, help us to be faithful. Help us to be diligent. And help us to be simply found faithful where we are today. Whether we're excavating dinosaurs or whether we're doing something else, let it be for you and for your glory in us. All these things we pray in Jesus' name. Amen.